This is one absolutely ridiculous laptop. This is the M4 MAX Macbook Pro 16-inch. I just ran all the benchmarks for creators on this and I'm so blown away. It smoked the Windows laptop so much that I actually had to resort on going on desktop and compare these one of the best desktop CPUs and setups, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, I know I do a lot of Windows stuff on this channel, but if you're one of those people who uses creative workflows, this is something that you should be seriously interested in. Let me show you why. This part of the video is sponsored by iThankyou Fusion Dock Max 1. The ultimate Thunderbolt 4 dock designed for Apple Silicon. The connectivity of it is simply insane. It supports 4 up to 6K displays up to 60 Hz. Because of the dual Thunderbolt 4 support, you will never run out of ports again. If you're looking for the ultimate dock for your Apple Silicon, then this one is most likely it. Check out the dock in the video description below and make sure you take advantage of their Black Friday sales. By the way, this model over here is the base model with only 48 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte SSD. But the M4 Max is maxed out in terms of 40 core GPU. But I've actually got the maxed out version of this on the way because I want to know how much performance are we going to get when we have 128 gigabytes of RAM, because some of the Adobe applications love to use a lot of RAM. So if you'd like to see that, subscribe if you haven't already, hit that like button, it does make a difference. Very quickly, my first experience when using this laptop is extremely premium. Just the way it all feels, the way it looks. There's a lot of very interesting things that I've seen Apple utilize and do that I haven't seen Windows laptops do, for example. And the way the 120 Hz screen, it does feel premium. The whole laptop feels snappy compared to some of the other MacBook Airs that I've been using. So I'm super impressed. This is not the most impressing bit. The most impressing bit is the actual benchmarks. So because I didn't have powerful enough laptops to actually compare with this, I am going to compare it with the brand new Intel Core Ultra 9 285K, Ryzen 9 7950X and Ryzen 9 9900X CPUs. Now these are all desktop CPUs and pull a lot more power, and let's start with the power draw. This M4 Max pulls at full utilization roughly around 55 watts package power draw. It's on battery, okay? And you get the same performance whether you're plugged in or unplugged. I've got another video when I'm going to explain the low power automatic and high power mode on these laptops, which is a little bit new, and how exactly does the power utilize and what's the performance like between the 3 power modes. So if you'd like to see that, it's coming up. The 7950X is pulling 230 watts. The 9900X is pulling 162 watts and the 285K is pulling 253 watts while running the Cinebench R24. So bear in mind, our M4 Max is at least 3, if not 5 times more power efficient compared to some of the competition here, okay? 285K is pulling almost 5 times more power than this guy here. And bear in mind, all of the Ryzen and Intel CPUs are tested with RTX 4090 and 64 gigabytes of RAM. So our M4 Max is the benchmark, and let's see if the PC CPUs can actually beat it. Cinebench R24, the 285K is about 18% slower in single core score, but about 20% faster in the multi-core score. In terms of 7950X is around 33% slower in the single core score, but within 1% of the multi-core score. Okay, do you understand what that means? Basically, this M4 Max has the CPU power of 7950X Ryzen CPU. That's a 16-core desktop CPU that's absolutely ridiculous and pulls quite a lot of power. And if we compare it to the 9900X with 25% slower in the single core score and about 14% slower in the multi-core score. I mean, this MacBook smokes the 9900X brand new 12-core CPU from AMD Ryzen. That's mental to me. Looking at Geekbench 6, we can see that the 285K is about 18% slower in the single core score and about 12% slower in the multi-core score. 7550X about 25% slower in the single core score and about 25% also slower in the multi-core score. 9900X 16.4% slower in the single core score and 22% slower in the multi-core score. Geekbench, this Mac absolutely smokes the CPUs. Another thing we want to see is the iGPU performance. Obviously, there's no point comparing it to the RTX 4090, but the 285K has a pretty improved integrated graphics in there. But we can see that the M4 Max graphics is still about 5 times, if not almost 10 times faster in the Vulkan/Metal and OpenCL scores. But Vulkan and Metal can't be really, compared really the same. But the M4 Max GPU is really impressive. Let's take a look at some of the actual creator benchmarks like Photoshop. So here we can see that the 285K is 32% slower than the M4 Max. The 7950X is about 24.4% slower than the M4 Max, and the 9900X about 18.5% slower than the M4 Max. Let's put it another way. This M4 Max is the fastest thing I have ever tested for photo editing. It's ridiculous. Moving on to Premiere Pro, and here looking at the 285K, bear in mind they're tested with RTX 4090. The 285K is about 26 to 32% faster in standard and extended overall scores. Long GOP is about 25% faster. That's H.264 or 5 codecs. So interestingly, the M4 Max media engines can't quite keep up with the QuickSync of Intel, which seems better. Then we have Interframe, which is about 28.6% slower on the 285K. So that's ProRes codecs now, which is really good on the M4 Max, because that is Apple codec, and Apple has their own media engines that just absolutely fly through and are one of the best ever for that. So Intel can't keep up with that. The RAW codec, interestingly, is not as good as on M4 Max. The 285K is almost twice as good, which to me is interesting because the RAW codec uses the CPU but also utilizes the GPU sometimes when playing back certain red RAW, for example. So the RTX 4090 really pushes that, ahead, and you can see that when having a desktop workstation with like high-end graphics card, it's still better. In terms of GPU effects, the 285K with RTX 4090 is about 71% faster. Long GOP standard score is only about 13.7% faster. The Interframe standard is 32% slower because, again, ProRes. And GPU effects and raw standard scores are much better on the 285K. So what we can see here is when having a desktop dedicated workstation with Intel iGPU setup and you have Intel QuickSync and a high-end GPU, it is actually better than the M4 Max. But at the same time, it pulls a lot more power and it's not portable. This guy is portable and runs it all on battery. The 7950X is only 7.3% faster in the standard overall scores and about 15% faster in the extended overall scores. So as you can see, the 7950X is a lot closer to the M4 Max. And then the 9900X is about 6.7% faster in the standard overall and about 15.2% faster in the extended overall scores. Moving on to DaVinci Resolve, which is very well optimized for the Apple Silicon. Looking at the 285K, and we can see that the basic, which is actually the free version of DaVinci Resolve, is about 5.8% slower than the M4 Max, and then the standard overall score is basically the same as the M4 Max, which is ridiculous. The extended overall score is about 25% faster, and we can expect that because there's some extended codecs and like high-end resolutions and RAW, which obviously is better suited for RTX 4090 and so on, but still super impressive. This time, interestingly, the long GOP score is better on M4 Max. I still think that the 285K has some kind of a weird thing going on where the iGPU isn't fully utilized on DaVinci Resolve. Interestingly, the Fusion score is also slower on the 285K compared to the M4 Max. But when it gets to AI and GPU effects, obviously the RTX 4090 smokes the M4 Max, which is pretty obvious. The 7950X is 11.4% slower in the overall basic score, about 1% slower in the standard overall scores, and about 22.3% faster in the extended overall scores. 9900X is about 18% slower in the overall basic scores. The standard overall score is about 5.8% slower. That's the biggest gain now over these three CPUs. And then the extended overall score is about 18% faster. So as you can see, this M4 Max keeps up a little bit better in DaVinci Resolve compared to these CPUs than in Premiere Pro. Moving on to some 3D CPU and GPU rendering. So firstly, Blender in CPU. The 285K is about 16 to 33% faster in the monster, junk shop and classroom scenes. And Intel is extremely good in Blender, especially the new Core Ultra 200 S series CPUs. They're really good at Blender. The 7950X, which has 16 cores, is about 13 to 32% faster in those same scenes. And interestingly, the 19900X is about 2 to 4% slower in the monster and junk shop scenes and about 12% faster in the classroom scenes. CPU rendering performance still super impressive to me on the M4 Max because it is on laptop. These other CPUs pull so much more power. Now, let's move on to the GPU rendering and how good is the GPU. I took the Asus ProArt P16, which is one of the best laptops I have here for RTX dedicated GPU on laptop, which has the RTX 4070 mobile GPU. And you can see that the P16 is about 28 to 37% slower monster, junk shop and classroom scenes. The M4 Max absolutely slices the RTX 4070 mobile. Let's take a look at desktop GPU rendering performance. Now the 79XTX, the best GPU that AMD can offer, is about 20 to 29% slower than the M4 Max in the same scenes as these. Do you understand how ridiculous that is? Looking at RTX 3080 desktop CPU, we're about 2% slower in the monster scene, about 12.2% faster in the junk shop scene, and about 4% slower in the classroom scene. It's basically an RTX 3080 desktop version that pulls about 10 times the power draw as the M4 Max. When looking at the power draw of the GPU, it's around 30 to 35 watts, what I can see the power draw. The RTX 3080 pulls 300 and something watts. And I think this one there is the Supreme X version, which pulls even more than 320 watts. That is ridiculous. The RTX 4070 is about 10 to 22% faster in these scenes. So we're getting very close to the desktop RTX 4070 performance. Now, let's move on to Redshift. And here we can see that the 79XTX is about 8% slower again than the M4 Max, which is ridiculous. RTX 3090 is 18% faster and the RTX 4070 is about 6% faster. So you can see in Redshift, we're within 6-7% of the RTX desktop size GPU, which is ridiculous. Obviously ours has a lot more RAM because of the unified memory. We can use more VRAM than the 8 GB that you get off the RTX 4070. In conclusion, you can see that the M4 Max is an absolute beast. It's very hard to beat. It's ridiculous performance on a laptop. If you are doing photo and video editing and you need the ultimate create laptop on the go, there is nothing that can beat this. And stick around till we get the other one in as well, so we can check out how good is the 128 GB version of this. Let's take a look at the price point. This laptop here costs roughly around $4,000. And for that $4,000, you could easily build any one of these CPU systems. The 285K with RTX 4090, 64 GB of RAM, and you should probably have even more money left. If you want to know the best bang for buck create a PC, then check out the build guides in the video description below. I'll explain everything in there, which actually means that the PC, if you don't need the portability, has still better bang for buck in terms of workstation use. But there's another catch to it, which is the power consumption. We're gonna have to figure out how much power are we actually gonna saving when utilizing this compared to the PC. Depending on your electricity prices, this could be a factor in there as well. I'm still trying to figure out how to actually measure it and put this in equal comparison, because there's the idle and max power draw and how much both of these systems are using power. Let's say when the Mac Studio with M4 Max comes out for, I don't know, $2,000 or something like that, that could be a ridiculous machine that is just insane. And the M4 Ultra that has double the performance of this with 80 core GPU, it could actually smoke some absolute workstations on PC side. So my question to you is, do you need the portable aspect of the device, or could you get away with desktop, like a Threadripper down there, like I have, and then on the go, you just need a laptop perhaps when MacBook Air is more than enough for that? Or would you require this amount of power on the go? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thanks very much guys for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.